Leanne's Story, a digital research report by Cherie Buckley and Brittany Green. Yuri Bronfenbrenner argues that in order to understand human development, one must consider the entire ecological system in which growth occurs. To do this, Bronfenbrenner created the social ecological model of human development. Bronfenbrenner's key point is that a child's developmental outcomes are shaped by the interaction of genetics, biological, psychological, and sociological factors in the context of environmental support. Bronfenbrenner's biological model outlines the exact factors that influence a child's growth and development. The first system is called the microsystem. This system has the most direct influence on the child's development and is referred to as the immediate relationships the child will experience. The second system of influence is called the mesosystem. This system includes the links between two or more social settings and the relationships that develop. The third system is called the exosystem and includes the links between two or more settings where at least one of these does not actually include the child. The fourth system is called the macrosystem and consists of each of the other systems below it. It is basically how the culture surrounding the child influences their growth and development or decisions they make. The final system is called the chronosystem, which basically includes either change or consistency over a period of time in the characteristics of the person as well as the change in the environment. Despite 20 years of economic growth, many people in Australia do not have at least a decent basic standard of living. 1 in 6 children live at or below the poverty line. How does this affect children's development and education? The education system has an obligation to provide social justice to all students and reduce inequalities in their academic achievement. Schools need to provide all students with a fair education that ensures all students achieve at their utmost potential, regardless of any differences, by holding high and appropriate expectations for all, providing an inclusive curriculum, making modifications where necessary to support learning, and making learning relevant to their lives.
Let's meet Leanne. She came of a family of generational poverty. Leanne's home life was chaotic, with little structure or routine, and she was exposed to violence and family disruption. Leanne also had poor nutrition and healthcare and lived in a rundown house with insufficient facilities. Unfortunately, Leanne was given little environmental stimulation. Her parents were quite disengaged and gave her little attention, a typical parenting approach of low-income families. Research has shown that stimulation in early childhood is of paramount importance to a child's development and growth, and the foundation on which to maximise children's physical, social and emotional capacities. Because of these factors, Leanne's language development was poor and her readiness for school was impaired. However, as UNICEF argue, there are facets of Leanne's microsystem that would certainly help mitigate the effects of poverty. For example, the availability of early childhood centres, daycare centres or parenting programs. Intervention at this early stage in her development would have been beneficial and arguably more successful than at any other stage in a child's life.
When Leanne began her education, she attended a local primary school. The school she attended was of low quality with limited funding and resources. These are aspects related to her macrosystem of development. Her immediate environment, the microsystem, affects which school she could attend. Her mesosystem influenced the relationships that she developed between her home and school environment, and her macrosystem influenced the school she attended based on area zoning and her family's financial situation. To further handicap Leanne's learning, her parents could not afford to give her the same opportunities that a middle-class family could. For example, the materials she needed to facilitate her learning were not obtainable for her, objects such as computer, internet and books. Evidence suggested by ARGI 2007 explains that children who live in low socioeconomic areas have decreased opportunities to use and access current technologies, such as computers, internet and communication tools. Leanne's parents were not heavily involved in the school or her education. A disadvantage was that parent-teacher partnerships were not well established, which Bronfenbrenner asserted as a determinant of a child's success in school. Positive relations must be established and encouraged from home to school and school to home, this being a factor of the mesosystem. In this situation, Leanne's parents had minimal interactions with the school and her classroom teacher. They were often inadequately skilled to be able to assist her with her homework, and they showed little interest in her education. Inequalities that occurred during her primary years were that teachers were not very tolerable to her inability to always have the right school supplies. The teachers often told her that it was not good enough, rather than taking into account her family situation and encouraging her to come to school regularly, as opposed to not at all. In terms of mathematics, Leanne had no prior knowledge of counting or numbers when she began Year 1, as she received little stimulation from her parents prior to school. Teachers attempted to fix this and spent some time developing her early stages of number sense and sequencing. However, she began to not understand the basics along the way, for example, the relationship with numbers and the quantities they represent, which the teachers sometimes missed. As a result, Leanne began to develop a negative attitude towards maths. Proactive processes that occurred. Home readers were rarely done, and her reading abilities suffered. However, the school did well to recognise this and place Leanne in a specialist reading program where she met with a reading teacher 3 times a week for half an hour each session. During this time, they focused on increasing her phonemic awareness and learning sight words, which in effect helped with the flow of her reading.
When Leanne transitioned into high school, she moved away from an environment where she had the same teacher for the year, throughout all learning areas, to a situation where she had multiple specialist teachers. TEAS 2007 asserts to this as being a child entering into a subject-centred world and, in effect, more points at which a child can experience failure. Leanne's junior secondary teachers were also in a hard position. Not only did they need to consider the failure of Leanne's primary school education, they also needed to prepare her academically for upper secondary. This often led to Leanne's teachers taking the approach of simply having low expectations of her academically, rather than trying to fill in the gaps of her knowledge. The cost of learning was another factor that disadvantaged Leanne. Although the school she attended was lenient on not wearing the school uniform, as many parents could not afford it, they weren't so lenient on the payment for elective subjects Leanne was interested in. The cost of her elective subjects, such as woodwork, were not affordable choices for her, and Leanne was disadvantaged because of this. With high school, inevitably, there is homework, and it plays a major part of the expectations teachers have on students. The multiple teacher students have impacts on the amount of homework they receive, as one teacher is unaware of what the other teacher has requested. This often creates homework overload for students. When Leanne was given homework, low expectations were held of her completing it, and this often led to homework that was of poor quality and with little feedback given when she did hand it in. This led to Leanne having the attitude of why bother? Thus, homework became ineffective. Staff turnover is high in low socio-economic area schools, which makes it hard for students to form close relationships with teachers, which is known to be essential for engaging students in learning. Leanne had a few teachers she liked, and the commonality was that they delivered a supportive classroom context. However, her other teachers displayed an authoritarian approach and often berated Leanne for her performance, and their disciplinary action was harsh. This led to further deteriorate her attitude towards school and education. According to the ABC Four Corners video on growing up poor, young girls from low socio-economic areas and families are 5 times higher than national average to become teen mothers. In Leanne's case, she became one of these statistics after falling pregnant at the age of 16. As a consequence, she soon dropped out of school without completing Year 10. As Leanne is a young mother, she is unlikely to enter the workforce. Reliant on parenting payments to survive, the cycle of poverty continues.
In Leanne's life, there were a number of attributes that affected her development and education. Leanne was born into a family where the generational patterns of living in poverty were well established and developed over 2 generations. Her parents were caught in the cycle as they did not have the sufficient knowledge, skills, education, and assistance to get themselves out of the recurring cycle. Overall, it appears that the education system endeavours to provide a fair and equitable education for all. However, sometimes students from disadvantaged backgrounds require more support, more guidance, and more accommodations for their successes to equal that of more advantaged children. The microsystem and mesosystem influenced the types of resources available to Leanne, and the attitude she developed towards school directly related to the amount of effort that she put into school and homework. Her surrounding macrosystem influenced her educational successes, as her family and society had their own perceptions and values of education. It is important to establish the influencing factors in Leanne's life outside of school, as schools can actually amplify these if teachers are not aware of them. It seems this statement is both true and false. Leanne's teachers and school excelled in some areas of providing her with an equitable and fair opportunity to succeed. In other circumstances, this was not the case. It seems that all teachers need to shift their vision of education to suit this quote. Education is the shift from success for some to success for all. Thank you for listening to our digital story. We hope you enjoyed it.